What's up, guys? I'm Josh and I lift things, and I'm here to talk about the beginner LP tier list. Before we get into it, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that. Follow these socials and join the Discord. Links are in the description. So boys, this is something new for the channel. I'm going to be doing a tier list of some of the most famous beginner LPs. If I end up forgetting one or you end up just liking this style of content, please leave a comment and let me know. It helps the algorithm. If you don't know what a beginner LP routine is, make sure you watch my video. It should be in the top right hand corner right now. For too long didn't watch, beginner LPs add weight at the same rate that time increases. If you don't know what a tier list is, where have you been for the last couple of years? But just know that the higher I rank something, the better it is, in my opinion. Disclaimer, I haven't ran all these programs. I mean, I've only been a beginner once or had to regain after a significant break so many times. But I have programmed these programs for a lot of people. Programmed these programs. If you've ran these yourselves and you think I've forgotten something, let me know why I'm in a deep below. So let's get started. So guys, these are the options that we're dealing with. We have 531 for beginners by Jim Wendler. We have the All Pro beginner routine from the old bodybuilding.com forums. We have Johnny Candito's LP with a scuffed image because I couldn't find a better one. We have the Greyskull LP by Johnny Payne. We have GZCLP by GZCL. The Ice Cream Fitness 5x5 by Jason Blaha. We have Ivysaur's 448. The nSuns 531 LP. The Phraks variant of the Greyskull LP. Starting Strength, the Classic by Mark Ripito, and Stronglifts 5x5. So we're just going to go right in a row here, knock them out. So 531 for beginners. I'm not sure if this was ever actually in one of the 531 books, whether it be like Beyond 531 or 531 Forever, but Jim did write about it just right on his blog, jimwendler.com, which by the way, all links will be in the description. Now here you see even Jim saying that most people don't have to worry about training differently as a beginner, at least for as far as his 531 programs go. But here is the setup. 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're training squat, bench, deadlift, press, bench, squat, and I'm assuming you alternate the very next week. Now, if you don't know how the 531 reps actually work, it's pretty basic. You find a training max, which is 90% of your true 1 rep max or estimated 1 rep max. And then you do all of your sets based upon percentages of that training max. So then he wants you to do a 5x5 at first set last. That just means whatever your first work weight was that day, you do 5 sets of 5 of that after accomplishing your 531 reps. Now here he says it in very plain English, and I appreciate this a lot. If any of your reps fail to achieve to these standards during your training cycle, you do not increase your training max. This is very important for beginners to know, that if form was scuffed, you have no reason to add weight to the bar. Now, here is both a good and a bad thing in my opinion. So many beginners are so obsessed with the fact that a beginner LP isn't enough work for me. I need my curls, dude. But really, that's just not the case. But you also typically want to program something for these people because they are so brain dead when it comes to proper exercise selection. So leaving it up to people is kind of weird. But I like the way he does set it up. You have a movement of push, a movement of pull, and then single leg or core, which is typically how I advise most people to pick an assistance lift anyways. And he's also pretty strict about what you should do for warm-ups and everything else. Here we have him recommending the Agile 8, which is an awesome warm-up. Has you doing plyometrics before your main strength work. That's great. And then also actually programs in some time of conditioning, which is just unheard of for beginner LPs, but I really appreciate. So 531 for beginners has awesome rep ranges that just work. Very slow progression. That means you'll be able to do it for a very long time, which is awesome. A lot of variability. You can kind of do what you want with it. Trains plyometrics and conditioning and everything else. I kind of disagree with how open-ended it is for some people. So for that, I think I'm going to have to give this an A and not an S. I love Jim Wendler. I run 531 myself, but I think I got to put this in A. Okay, now moving on to the All Pro beginner routine. So this one's a little bit different. It's not a daily linear progression. It's actually on a cycle of like 5 weeks or so, but it still is linear progression. And as you can see, this was posted way back in 2007. Man, good old days, huh? So like most of these other routines, they are done 3 times a week. This one actually has a modulating weight throughout the week. So your first workout, let's just say Monday, is going to be your heaviest. And then let's say Wednesday, you have 10% weight drop. And then Friday, you have a 10% weight drop from there as well. Has a little warm-up protocol of doing a quarter of your work weight and then a half of your work weight. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think people should make up their own warm-up weights. It's a great time for beginners to practice auto-regulation. Video in the top right-hand corner. It's kind of just not necessary to program it in this way with that strict of numbers. But here's where this routine really shines for some people. All in one day, you're going to be doing squats, bench, bent rows, overhead press, stiff leg deadlifts, barbell curls, and calf raises. So this is great for the people that think that you can't possibly add assistance movements to a certain beginner LP, or that try to add far too much. This is pretty much covering everything you need to worry about. You know, there's no tricep isolation, but there is fucking 2 pressing exercises. There's no vertical pull, but you do have bent rows, and your barbell curls will train your biceps enough anyways. Actually includes calf raises, which is hilarious. So then the rate of progression. The first week, you do all 4 sets for 8. Then next week for 9, then 10, then 11, then 12. If you get all the reps, and I'm just going to assume with good form, you add weight by 10% across the board. Now, another great thing about this routine that I think has to be said is this thread has 101 pages. So if you have any questions, I'm sure it's been answered there. All the other ones, you can buy the ebook, or maybe you have to go on some like old T-Nation forum and get the advice that you need. But this one is all kind of self-contained in the same thread, so that's nice. My issues with this, however, are it's just far too slow. You're adding 10% weight, which as a beginner, you know, could be upwards of 10 pounds every 5 weeks, while any other LP, even slower ones, will have you adding that 10 pounds over the course of like a week and a half. This means that this can be a great option for people maybe that are a little bit older, or that are on a cut, or don't want some aggressive training plan. But for most people that need to run a beginner LP, this just kind of seems too slow. But another great thing is you get tons of form practice at a pretty low intensity with some very major movements that you're going to be doing for the rest of your career. So I think that's worth being said. So it's a great routine, but in the context of all these other ones, I'm gonna have to give it like kind of a low score. I feel bad. This is actually what I ran my freshman year with my brother. I had done some training before for like football in 7th and 8th grade, but never anything that intense. We had a rack in our basement that I would sometimes use, but I was a fucking dumb kid. So I do have a soft spot for it, but in comparison to all these other programs, I'm gonna have to give it like a D, I think. Great program, just this is the best of the best, so it's hard to compare. So now moving on to the Candito LP. This is just a straight up PDF, not even a website, and it's only 13 pages, which is the absolute shortest explanation of a workout routine. I mean, the Wendler one was only 1 blog post, but he's written hundreds of pages of 531 ebooks, and it's just a variant of 531, so that's understandable. This is kind of dry, we'll say. Another thing that's important to know is that this is multiple versions. If I scroll down, there's a strength and control version, a strength and power version, and a strength and hypertrophy version. I don't agree with beginners trying to mess with training variables to try to, I'm training for control, whatever the fuck that means. And hypertrophy, I haven't really looked at it, but let me guess. You're going to do some more exercises for 3 sets of 8 to 12, because that's just the standard bro amount to give people. So let's just look at the first one listed that seems to have the most information on it, which would be the strength and control. This one is a 4-day a week, alternating between heavy, lower, and upper, and then control, upper, and lower. This kind of seems like it's trying to do some conjugation of like the West Side for Skinny Bastards routine, where you have dynamic days and you have strength days, which is great. I'm just not sure if that's something that a beginner really has to focus on. I think they should just try to move as much weight as possible. But squats 3 times 6 and deads 2 times 6, that's fine. Optional exercises, whatever that means. So they're not even really telling you what to do, although they give advice at the bottom. But that's, again, leaving beginners with user discretion is kind of a mistake. So then bench 3x6, primary upper back 3x6, shoulder 1x6. So if you don't know, Candito is definitely a power lifter. So of course he's not gonna try to program the overhead press all that much. I personally disagree. I think the vertical press is one of the biggest strength markers for a beginner trainee, or really for all trainees. But I do appreciate that there's a solid amount of back work here being done. Too many people just do so much pressing and then never get any back work in, and they're stuck with this continual monkey posture. And then yeah, so control day, you have a spot-o press and a pause squat, pause deads, which I do not recommend beginners to be doing. Beginners overhype deadlift injuries so much anyways, and have kind of atrocious form that it's almost right for them to overhype it. And then to make them add in a difficulty like pause deadlifts, I just necessarily do not agree with. Now, as far as progression, each week add 0 to 10 pounds. And he is exactly right. Now I know your first thought. Why include 0? That's a good question. It says usually the bench press will develop slower than the lower body lifts. I mean, yeah, that's completely true. It's a smaller muscle group being worked, but it shouldn't be up to the beginner to decide when to add weight. Again, my auto-regulation video talks about how terrible beginners are at knowing how hard they need to train something. It should be based on something like you got so many reps on this set, so you add this amount of weight. Or if you completed all of the main sets, then you just add this amount of weight. And then if you fail, there's a deload procedure. This is kind of just willy-nilly add what you want, so that's kind of open-ended, and I'm not a fan of that. Now, accessories, dumbbell row, awesome. Barbell row, great. any machine upper back. Yeah, it's cool. Shoulder exercises. So he does want presses, even though he's not really training the strict overhead press with the same progression as the other movements. That's interesting. And then he does have some vertical pulls, and then just a bunch of optional exercises. I don't know if a beginner would need close grip bench along with everything else that they're doing in this routine. Extremely strict dumbbell curl and programming loose form dumbbell bicep curls. I'm not saying cheat reps are the worst thing in the world, and tons of super advanced lifters kind of swear by them. Beginners should not be programming a loose form, because that is the most arbitrary thing I've ever heard. Yeah, I've made my decision. Love Johnny, love his routines. His 6-week deadlift program is pretty good. His YouTube content is amazing. I gotta give this an F. It's too many decisions for beginners to make, just some weird choices. I'm assuming he kind of just typed this up just to get something out and didn't really care that much about it, which I understand, but in comparison to all these other awesome programs, it's got to be an F. Now, moving on to Greyskull LP. Now, I will let my bias out right at the beginning. Greyskull LP is one of my favorite beginner LPs. Please purchase the ebook. Purchase all of these guys' books. If you want to actually run the routine, if you have any questions, purchase the ebook. Don't just fucking ask in some Discord. The Greyskull LP is amazingly written, and it's really funny too, but it's also just a super, super solid beginner LP. So this is the first mention that we have here of AMRAP, or as many reps as possible. So this is like another standard LP, 3 days a week, going ABA, BAB. So at day 1, you have bench press 2 times 5, and then 1 times AMRAP, and then squat 2 times 5, and then plug in accessory exercises. Overhead press 2 by 5, 1 times AMRAP, deadlift 1 times AMRAP, and then bench. And then obviously it would alternate the next week. So you had overhead press, squat, bench, deadlift. So if you know anything about beginner LPs, this is going to seem a little bit strange. 1, you're not squatting every single day. You're squatting on Monday and Friday, no matter what, never alternating. You are deadlifting once a week. That's more common, but only for 1 set of AMRAP. And then obviously it's the bench and the overhead that are alternating the first movement. A keen observer will also see that you're not starting with a lower body movement. A lot of these programs have you do squats right off the bat. When you get very heavy, doing squats first will be a pain in the ass when you have to do a bunch of other movements afterwards. You will be so drained. Now, for someone who wants to focus on a sport like football or rugby, maybe it's better to train your squats first. Those are going to be your main strength builders, right? For most people who only care about aesthetics, being able to focus really hard on your bench press or overhead press will do you wonders. Now, the way the AMRAP work is whatever amount of reps you get on that set dictates how much weight you add next time. So a lot of other programs are, oh, you did this amount, add 10%, add 5 pounds to upper body, 10 pounds to lower body, whatever. In Greyskull LP, if you get less than 5 reps on your AMRAP set, you do not add weight. You had failed that session. If you get somewhere from 5 to 9 reps, you add the typical weight increase. If you get 10 reps or above, you double the weight increase. This is awesome, especially when you factor in that the weight increase for upper body lifts is only 2.5 pounds every session. That means you're probably going to need to pick up micro plates to run this program. But as Candito so elegantly said in the last one, the upper body lifts progress at a much slower rate. Now for squat and deadlift, you still have the classic 5 pounds if you got 5 to 9 reps during the AMRAP. You may have realized that I was kind of shitting on just random accessory stuff, but if you pick up the book, the plug-in accessory exercises aren't that random. They have tons of templates that you use in the book to decide what you want to work for. He has no problem programming in conditioning, kettlebell swings, plyometrics, bodybuilding work, whatever you want to do. I kind of take the 5-3-1 approach of picking a push, a pull, or maybe an arm isolation, and then a core and single leg. Now the deadlift being only 1 times AMRAP, just 1 set a week, a beginner can progress on that. The whole idea is don't tax yourself so heavily on this exercise that once it gets very heavy, it will be pretty hard to recover from. Some people like it, some people love it, some people hate it. I personally am quite a fan. So Greyskull LP is getting an A from me. It could be better, and there's something that I think is distinctly better that we'll get into in a little bit, but it's an amazing routine. And next we have GZCLP, and here it is. The infographic. If you guys don't know, GZCL is the same guy that made Jacked and Tan. I believe his name's Cody Lefevre. He's on Reddit. He's made tons of great articles, have helped hundreds of people, which, by the way, not to mention, all of these coaches have. They have made instrumental differences in thousands of people's lives. So shout out to all of them. I don't want to be shitting on anyone here. I'm trying to, give my opinion. And this is pretty much how all of Cody's programs are set up. You have a tier 1, you have a tier 2, and a tier 3. Which is a great way to focus on lifting. You have your main exercise you want to focus on, let's say bench press. You then have a movement which aids your bench press, let's say close grip bench press. You then have a tier 3 movement, which is like ancillary to your bench press. So maybe we'll say tricep pushdowns, or maybe a lockout press. So they use different rep ranges here. You know, sometimes you are working in the low rep ranges. Then for your T3s, you'll be using higher rep ranges. It says 3 or 4 days a week, but that's because it's alternating. If you took a rest day in between each of these workouts, one week you would do 3, the next week you would do 4. So workout 1 is squat day. You do a T1 squat, 5 sets of 3, bench, 3 sets of 10, pull down, 3 sets of 15. Overhead press day, 5 sets of 3, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 15. Deadlift day, 5 sets of 3, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 15. And this is just an example, but clearly you can see that Cody likes the higher rep ranges of 3 sets of 15 for the T3 or the bodybuilding accessory work. And really here it just looks like he's programming in back work every single day, which is awesome. Now here you can see that the T2 exercise is just a higher rep variation of the alternate days compound movement. So on heavy squat day, you're doing light bench, and on heavy bench day, you're doing light squat. Same thing with overhead press and the deadlift. Now, someone's going to say 3 sets of 10 of deadlift is too much. If you're doing that with a super high intensity all the time, I agree. As a beginner, it's amazing form practice and will help build up general work capacity. So I don't think it's an issue here. And again, the reps are based off of AMRAP sets, which is awesome. 5 sets of 3, I think maybe a little low for most people's standards. GZCL is basically makes powerlifting programs, so I understand that bias here. But for most people, I think they're going to have better results training in the 3 sets of 5 or maybe 5 sets of 5 range, depending. It's just a little bit of additional volume. But he makes up for that lack of volume with actual programmed accessory movement. Here is where GCL starts to shine that a lot of other programs start to fail on. It has a proper deload system. So every session add 5 pounds or 2.5 kilograms for bench and overhead, 10 pounds for squats and deadlifts, and switch to the next rep scheme when you can't complete the total reps. So the bench and overhead, that's kind of a fast progression. You're doing less total reps, so you'll be able to do that for longer, but I much prefer the 2.5 pound increase of the Greyskull LP. But when you fail a 5 set of 3, you then drop to 6 sets of 2. When you fail that, you drop to 10 sets of 1. And then if you fail that, you rest for a couple days, test for a new 5 rep max, use 85% of that number to start a new cycle at 5 sets of 3. Now, they make it seem here that when you immediately fail, you should do this. I don't know if I agree with that. What about days where you didn't get enough sleep, where you didn't drink enough water? Maybe there was a random form break that isn't actually attributable to muscular failure. There are other ways to attempt deloads, and I'm not sure if just full on changing the rep range is a way to go about that. I mean, it's one you can take, it's just not one that I think is that optimal. It's a really good program. It handles stuff really well. If you really want to jump into powerlifting right away, I think this is something that you could do, and it has pretty fast progression and it's pretty balanced, but I think we can do a little bit better. So GZCLP is going to get a solid B for me. And next we have Ice Cream Fitness by Jason Blaha. First off, base thumbnail. If you don't like barbell squats, my routines are not for you, so go find some fluff and pump routine. Oh, Jason. Okay, so here is how it's set up. Classic 3 times a week, ABA, BAB alternating. Now you have squats 5x5, bench 5x5, bent 5x5, shrugs 3x8, triple tricep extension 3x8, straight bar or incline curls 3x8, hyper extensions with a plate 2x10, cable crunches 3x10. Then moving on, workout B, squats 5x5, deadlift 1x5, standing press 5x5, bents 5x5 at a 10% lighter load than workout A, close grip 3x8, straight bar 3x8, cable crunches 3x10. So I have a couple issues with this. It kind of just seems like random amounts here or there. Why are tricep extensions done at the same volume as barbell shrugs? Barbell shrugs you can go very heavy on, or you can go very light on, depending on what you want to do. Tricep extensions, you're typically going to be wanting to train anywhere from like I mean, you could do 8 to 12, but a lot of people go higher. Straight bar or incline curls, these are kind of different depending on what you want to do. Most people probably just recommend just straight bar here. And when you get into more volume-based routines, then you add other curl variations. Hyper extensions with a plate randomly with 1 set less than everything else. Is that because your lower back's already going to be getting so torched from the bent rows? Probably. And then cable crunches 3 sets of 10 on both days. So you're doing abs every single day, which is great. But you very well could change this up and have one being like a hanging leg raise or a ab wheel. So you're doing barbell row every day, which means you're doing a lot of back work, which I can appreciate, but the 10% lighter than workout A seems just it seems arbitrary to me. They're doing deadlift 1x5. That's perfect. That's a fine amount, especially when you're doing squats 3 times a week, which I somewhat disagree with. And then you're also doing all of your upper body stuff after squats, so you may be a little bit torched. Good luck completing a solid set of 5x5 standing press after heavy 5x5 squats and deads. And then even better luck getting good barbell rows after these deadlifts, even at a 10% lighter load. I'm sure he mentions in the video when to add weight. I'm not going to watch it. I'm assuming it's every single session. This is fine. It kind of just seems like a Stronglifts 5x5, which we haven't gone over yet, with just more programmed in volume. I don't necessarily hate it or love it. It's fine. There's things I think it could do better. So for that reason, I'm going to give this a... Oh man, this is making me rethink my other options actually. Okay, yeah, Candito needs to be an F, at least just for the explanation of everything. This isn't strictly that. You know what? It's going to go next to the bodybuilding one. All pros beginner routine. Yeah, there we go. This is fine. Moving on to Ivysaur 448. This is so tiny. Let me zoom in real quick. Now, Ivysaur's beginner 448 program. I actually just programmed this for one of my buddies who was going on a massive cut, wanting to lose 100+ pounds and hadn't have a lot of lifting background in their life. They really liked it. We ended up progressing to a different beginner LP after quite some time, but this was really good just to keep them interested in the gym. So it's a typical 2-week alternating, week A and week B. So day 1, you have bench, squat, overhead press, and chins, with the main strength work being at 4x4, the rest being a 4x8. You then have bench at 4x8, but with your strength work that day of deadlift and overhead being 4x4, and then rows at 4x8, and then you have bench, squat, overhead, chins, and your bench and squat have AMRAP sets here, and then kind of a similar progression for week 2, just different days have the strength work built in, and different days have the AMRAPs. So your 8-rep weight is 90% of your 4-rep weight. This is kind of weird for beginners, because not only do they have to figure out what sets can they do for 4 sets of 4, but then they have to do the math of 90% of that for their 4 sets of 8, and maybe that's not appropriate for them, because maybe they don't have as much endurance or anything else. But that's fine. My issue with this is the progression rate. It says to add 15 pounds to your squat and deadlift a week. Does that mean that right on week A, on that first day, you add 15 pounds and do that all throughout the week? If so, there's no progression there. If you can do it this day, why not do more on the next day if you can? But that's because they're doing an AMRAP to then decide how much to do on this day once more. But then you're also adding that on deadlift and then not doing the deadlift AMRAP till a week and a half later. It's just kind of awkward to me. And the bench rows 10 pounds a week. I mean, you're benching 3 times a week, every single week, and you're adding 10 pounds. That's a lot of extra volume. That's a lot of extra weight that a lot of people probably can't do. Overhead press 5 pounds a week. If you've ever ran a beginner LP, you know that your overhead press is what shits out first. So I don't know what you're supposed to do with that necessarily. And then there's some extra credit, increase set count to 5. When? Why? What's the benefit? At what point would a beginner do this? It's kind of random. Chin-ups every workout, that's fine, but you already have chin-ups programmed in on days. So do you just strictly add them after a day where you deadlift and did barbell rows? When do you increase reps? Do you ever switch to weighted? That's kind of just left up to user discretion, which I don't like. And then add 2 squat sets to deadlift days. So not only would you be benching 3 times a week, you would then be squatting 3 times a week on top of all your other strength work. This routine has a lot of variance. I'm not sure if it's that great for most people, but it does have higher volume programmed in, which is useful for some people, especially people that think that they can't grow off 3 sets of 5. I'm going to give Ivysaur a solid C. You know what? This is making me rethink it. Bodybuilding is going to go up here, and Ivysaur is going to go down there. That's what I think. So yeah, now that I fixed this, bodybuilding is now C, Ivysaur and ice cream are now D. And now we're moving on to the nSuns 531 LP. So there isn't really a great website for this. There's a couple of write-ups on Reddit, but here's just a standard spreadsheet of what you can do. There's a 4-day, a 5-day, a 6-day deadlift focus. There's a lot of nSuns programs. Now I know it shares the name 531. nSuns himself has even gotten mad that he used the 531 name. It's not 531 at all, but they do share some similarities. So my camera is probably blocking some of this, but each week increase your training max if you're able to complete all the reps. So instead of a monthly training max increase like it is 531, you now do it weekly. And based on your AMRAP sets, you then change your training max by a certain amount. So 2 to 3 reps increased by 5, 4 to 5 increased by 5 to 10, more than 5 increased by 10 to 15. So these are just random weights put in. The spreadsheet's actually rather nice. But Monday you would do bench and overhead press, and you're doing a lot of sets. With a bench max of 300, your training max is 270. You're working up to a weight of 230 for a straight set of 4, it looks like, and then perioding down to a set of 5, a set of 6, and a set of 7. and then a set of 8+, which, believe it or not, this 8+ isn't your AMRAP set, so I don't really know what that means. It's kind of just doing it. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sets of bench. And then after that, you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of overhead. So your triceps are going to be fucking tanked. If your press is at 160, you're working up to a weight of 100. So that's not terrible. It's like, what, 60% intensity? Oh, but you're doing that 100 for 6 sets. Okay, yeah, so that's a lot. And then you're doing chest, arms, back for assistance. I don't know how much fucking time you're going to have to do an entire upper day, basically, of chest and back, plus your arms after that many. So that's going to be a long day. So then Tuesday, you're doing squats and sumo deads. And squats, you're working up to an AMRAP set. So that will dictate how much weight you're adding. And that's your top set for the day as well. So you pyramid up to it, and then you pyramid all the way down. For sumo deads, you pyramid up to a straight set and then do that all the way across the board, just like the overhead press. Now, this is interesting because he has sumo dead different than deadlift. So sumo dead is being treated as an assistance movement for deadlift, which is strange, especially for a beginner. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. You probably don't need that many form alterations to try to work with. You really just want to get one down and stick with it. But then Thursday, you now have the bench and the +1, the AMRAP set. That makes sense. And then you titrate down. And then you have close grip bench for, again, straight sets all the way across the board. Yeah, you are going to be fucking fried. I ran this actually for a couple of weeks, and I ended up getting an overuse injury in my elbow. But I was also, at the time, like dying from Crohn's disease. So maybe that had something to do with it. This routine, I don't remember it being this brutal. Did I do a 5-day variant? I don't know, but this looks fucking hard. And then deadlift, you have your +1 set, never going over 3 reps, that's fine. And then front squats, probably just for a break and for something else to do, I guess, with then training backs and abs. This looks brutal. If you're a masochist, feel free to run this. I don't know how much this would actively help a beginner with their strength. This may be way more about like physical capacity or GPP. I guess if you were spending a long time on rest periods, you'd be able to do it just fine, but then you're spending so much time in the gym. I mean, I'm sure this works. I'm sure it's brutal. I just don't know how applicable it is to most beginners. Not to mention no focus on overhead press. Again, the random close grip press. This is definitely a powerlifting focused one, but then they're throwing in front squats too. I don't know, man. I'm going to give nSuns strictly for beginners. I'm going to give it an F. If I saw someone who was benching 65 pounds doing 9 fucking reps of bench, I would be very confused with what they were doing. So I'm going to have to give it an F. Maybe if you took a very long break for an injury or some lifestyle factor and then you wanted to come back and just fucking blow yourself up, maybe that would be something to do. But that is a weird program. But anyways, now moving on to Phraks variant of Greyskull LP. So here we have it, my personal favorite routine. It is just Greyskull LP, but rather than adding assistance lifts, it now has alternating dedicated back movements. So you alternate chin-ups and barbell rows. This is great to have a better push-to-pull ratio, which most people just completely avoid. It has all the other benefits of Greyskull LP, which, by the way, this could just be Greyskull LP, but it's pretty famously known as the Phraks Greyskull, so that's why I'm listing it separately. Another great thing I didn't mention about the Greyskull LP in the beginning is their deload. So rather just when you fail a weight, you instantly go to a lower rep range, or you instantly progress in a different way, or you bash your head against a wall 3 times in a row before finally lowering weight. If you fail a set, you deload by 10% right off the bat. Now, I usually tell people to try the weight twice because, again, it could have been lack of sleep, hydration, whatever. But because you're doing the AMRAP sets, you can still hit rep PRs even when in a deload. So let's say you were benching 200 pounds and then you fail. And when you were building up to that 200, when you did 185, let's say you got 6 reps on your AMRAP. After failing 200 pounds and you deload 10%, so take 25 pounds off, you'll be at 175. And when you get back up to 185, you'll do that for probably 8 or 9 reps. So you're still hitting PRs and you're still progressing just in a higher rep range than if you just cut all weight and drop back. This means that even in a deload, you're still progressing. And this infographic that gets shared everywhere is kind of fine with its pull-up progression. If you can't do 3x5, do negatives till you can. They say to go with weighted right away. I kind of disagree. I think most people should stick with body weight till at least 3 sets of 10, but to each their own. This is the cream of the crop. This is A+ material. And by A+, I mean S+. This is the first S that we're getting, and I think, not to be a spoiler, the only S we're going to be getting. So now moving on to probably the most famous, starting strength. So a lot of people think that starting strength is kind of just one routine. That's not really the case. There's multiple phases, and depending on how fast or slow you're progressing, you move in from one phase to the next. I'm specifically going to be talking about phase 3 here because that's what most people recognize as starting strength, but I'll quickly go over the first ones. In phase 1, usually 1 to 3 weeks, you're deadlifting every single day. And pretty much once you get to the point of not being able to progress on adding weight every single time you go in, is when you switch to phase 2, which now includes power cleans. They think that now that your pull's strong enough, you can actually do some power cleans with some meaningful weight, which sure, whatever. Now, this is the first inclusion of programmed power cleans. Starting strength is basically a football program. Football, wrestling, rugby, whatever you want, it is a sports program. And as you see here, it says phase 2's length is variable from several weeks to several months, but eventually you move on to what most people consider the novice program for starting strength. Squats 3x5, bench press and overhead press alternating 3x5, deadlift 1x5 / power clean alternating. I think most people probably don't do this. They maybe just take a break off. And then day B, squats again, bench press and overhead alternating again, and then chin-ups. Now, I ran starting strength. After doing the all-pro beginner routine for a couple months, I ended up opting to go to starting strength, and I made crazy gains. I mean, I went from like 185 pound squat to 315 over like 2 months. I ended up getting a pretty bad back injury, but that was my fault, not starting strength. It works, especially if you're a young kid who is eating a lot and trying to grow. It works. The progression is probably too extreme for people that are older, that are on a cut. Even though there's been tons of success stories, there's also tons of failure stories. Mark Ripito is a pretty dogmatic person. He believes what he believes, and I respect that, but he is pretty anti assistance lifts. I think he's maybe eased up on that and has talked about adding in curls and tricep extensions just fine, but the progression rate is so quick that he doesn't want anything to be added that is going to take away from your recovery, which makes sense with such an aggressive plan. But you're doing squats 3 times a week, you're doing deadlifts at least once a week, more often than not twice. You're doing lower body first, there's no room for assistance movements. This is the Texas boy beginner LP. If all you care about is just shitting out strength as much as possible, this is probably the one to go with. There's tons of things I don't like about it. I don't like the deload sessions or the way you progress. If you fail a weight, you kind of just hit your head against the bar for another 3 days, and then if you don't get it, then you finally progress to a slower progression. I like that there's an off ramp for intermediates going to like Mad Cow or the Texas method. The thing I like the most about starting strength is the book itself has some of the best explanations on form ever written for the big 3 lifts. If you are ever confused and you want to just nerd out for a while, pick up the starting strength book and read it. You will learn so much about form that you had no idea about. The issue is that I don't want that to cloud my judgment. I think that it's worse than 5-through-1 for beginners and Phraks Greyskull LP, just as far as for the most general public goes. That being said, starting strength probably has the most success stories because it's one of the most famous, and it has one of the best form explanations ever written. I think I have to give it a B. I think that's where we're going to settle with it. Most trainees don't need power cleans. It's very aggressive loading. It's a lot. Fuck, I'm torn. All I'm seeing right now is the memes of hip drive in my head. Yeah, it's a B. It's a B. I'm moving on. Moving on to Stronglifts 5x5. So this is another routine that I gave a chance actually right when I got sick with Crohn's and I wanted to put on a whole lot of weight, and it didn't work. Well, for me, it didn't work. I was still actively very sick. There's tons of people that have success with it. It's pretty much starting strength, but with 5 sets of 5. And you add in some other back work. So rather than doing power cleans, you're gonna be just doing barbell row. So squat, bench, row, squat, overhead, deadlift, squat, bench, row, ABA, and then BAB. Pretty classic. You know, it works. The issue is 5 sets of 5 is a lot of work. It takes longer and it's hard. And then you're also going to be using a lighter weight. So progression here to all upper body lifts, you're adding 5 pounds. To squat, you're adding 5 pounds. And a deadlift, you're adding 10 pounds. To pretend that your overhead press can progress at the same rate as a squat is ridiculous. But then it says, but smaller increments work better if you're small or female. No, as a grown-ass man, I can promise you my shoulders are not as strong as my fucking quads, hams, and ass. Like, it's just a fact of life. And I believe on the app itself, it wasn't listed here, they also just throw in random plank variations for core work. I'm not sure how useful that is. If you really wanted to train abs, you would do something that lengthens and then contracts the muscle, like a cable curl, a hanging leg raise, etc. Not just another isometric contraction, which they are already getting during the deadlift and squat. And then here, if we look at the plateaus for failed reps. It has a good point here. Sometimes you fail reps because you've been making mistakes for a while, and that's true. You don't always need to fix that like right off the bat. But what they do end up having you do, if you fail, you deload by 10% to work on form. That's awesome, but there's no AMRAP sets like on Greyskull LP. So when you do deload, you're not hitting any PRs. You're just getting in form work and building back up slowly, hopefully giving your body more time to adapt. That's fine, but it absolutely could be better. And then here, once you can no longer progress, you then drop to 3 sets of 5, which is what most do in the first place. And then you drop to 3 sets of 3, which is fine, I guess. And then you switch to 1 heavy set of 3, followed by 2 lighter back off sets. This is really strange to me. What is the point of this besides at that point just lifting for ego if you're not going to be doing any type of competition? They try to sell this routine, not sell, it's free, but they try to promote this routine as a beginner friendly for anyone, nice slow progression, and then they have these fucking grannies doing like 1 set of 3. I don't understand it. So it's kind of just really random. Like, there's nothing terrible about it, but it's just not great either. But I like it better than the Ice Cream Fitness 5x5. Oh, okay, you know what, we're adjusting this again. Ivysaur is going up to C because it's fine. Stronglifts is going in front of Ice Cream Fitness. And that is it, I think. And guys, that is the tier list. So at the bottom, we have the nSuns 531 LP. I don't think it's a bad routine necessarily. I just don't think it's applicable for beginners. We then have Johnny Candido's LP. I'm going to switch these actually. Johnny Candido's LP. It just seems weird. There's so much variation for beginners that they shouldn't have to worry about. I just don't understand the point of it. I don't think he put that much time into the explanation. We then have Ice Cream Fitness 5x5. It's just a 5x5 with a lot of extra weird rep ranges. We then have Stronglifts 5x5. I don't hate it. I don't love it. Like, a D is what I got mostly all throughout school. So I think that's a fine rank, right? We then have Ivysaur 448. Again, up to user discretion. So there's a lot of kind of weirdness in it and just random rep ranges. There's nothing magical about a 4 or an 8. We then have the All Pro beginner routine. This really only ranks so high because it's very accessible to even, you know, you can make your grandfather do this and you probably wouldn't have a bad time. And it also shuts people up because there's no concern about not enough movements. We then have the GZCLP. I don't know why I said that so weird. A good routine with a good idea. I like people worrying about their assistance lifts assisting their main lifts, and then you have a tertiary lift helping out just general body performance or looks. So I like that a lot. I think the progression's a little intense. It's also the only 4-day I think we saw throughout this entire thing. Then I have starting strength, very aggressive, but works for a lot of people. Mainly scored so high compared to the rest of them because it has such amazing write-ups of bodybuilding form. We then have, I'm gonna move this up here actually. We then have 531 for beginners. It's 531. It's kind of a slow progression, but it's very, very safe. Love Jim's programs in general. Awesome, awesome human. We then have the Greyskull LP by Johnny Payne, which in my opinion is the absolute best beginner LP. The only thing that tops it is specifically the Phraks variant, which includes as part of the heavy program compounds, more back work for a better push to pull ratio. And guys, that is the beginner tier list. Beginner LP tier list. It doesn't fucking matter. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something about these programs. Hopefully you can maybe tell someone else about this if they end up asking you questions about it. Maybe I got something wrong and I'm not considering it enough. So please let me know down in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe. If you made it this far, you fucking owe me. Make sure you follow all these socials and join the Discord. Links in the description. Thank you so much for watching again and have a great day.